Hello everyone and welcome to a really wild game that was played today in a simultaneous exhibition on Lichess. The simultaneous exhibition was held by Maxime, Vachier, Lagrave since the whole world is in lockdown. The name of the simultaneous exhibition was the Lockdown Simul, and here he faces Ivan Ljubičić. We already seen one game Ljubo played. It was some 2 years ago. I showed it on the channel where he was where he was struggling against a 400 player. But he defeated him in the end. And now his opponent is a much stronger player, one of the candidates of the 2020 candidates tournament, Maxime, Vachier, Lagrave. So Maxime is white on all boards, as is usually the case when a simultaneous exhibition is being played, and it's really quite a game. It's full of surprises, so let's just dive straight into it. And Ljubo asked me a few days ago what should he play against Maxime. I told him, you should face him where he's strongest. So as you're black, you should prepare the Najdorf and the Grunfeld, and whatever he plays, you will be ready. So I don't know if he prepared the Grunfeld as well, but he definitely prepared the Najdorf, as you'll see in this game. So Maxime opens with e4. We have c5, the Sicilian defense is on the board, knight f3, d6, and now d4. C captures, knight captures on d4, knight to f6, knight to c3, and a6. Ljubo goes for the Najdorf variation against Maxime, which is always the way you want to play chess. You want to fight someone where they are strongest. So bishop to e3, continuing the development, we have e5, kicking away the knight. This is the most popular move in this variation. Knight back to b3, and now bishop to e7, just preparing the castle. Maxime goes f3, he strengthens his e4 pawn, so the knight can at some point be shifted over to d5 if needed. We have bishop to e6, and now queen to d2, developing the queen and preparing the castle queen side. So it's gonna be a wild game already. You can see as the castles will be on opposite sides of the board. We have castles by black and a queenside castle by Maxime, and here there are a couple of ways you could play this position. a5 is a popular option, knight bd7 is a popular option, but Ljubo goes for b5 immediately. He knows this will be a race, so he wants to attack on the queen side as soon as possible. And Maxime doesn't want to be behind on the attack, so he starts expanding on the king side. We have g4, and now b4. We have knight to a4, and here a very sort of a critical position already. A lot of games reach this position. For example, there is a known move a5, as the queen is kind of threatening to pick up the b4 pawn, so a5 can be played. There is a known game Peter Svidler played against Kurt Hansen in 1995 where a5 was played, and Svidler was able to win that game. So it's not considered the greatest of options. And there is one game where d5 was played right away. Pablo Riccardi played it against Garry Kasparov in 1997, and Kasparov won that game very nicely. But here, knight b to d7 is played, and this is in fact the best try for black, as there is no actual danger of this pawn being grabbed. If you capture the pawn, then you allow black this d5 freeing move, which you always want to play in the Sicilian, and after you deal with this attack on the queen, then even d4 becomes an option, just grabbing more space in the center, which would be excellent for black. So instead, after this knight b to d7, we have g5, continuing the expansion on the king side, pushing back the knight. We have knight to h5, and now comes rook to g1, and this is one of those positions where that even such a great theoretician like Maxime Vachier Lagrave didn't have at home on the board. Because here it's actually best to capture on b4. Point is that now d5 is a bit different because of a certain something. Because here you go queen to a5, and now, for example, if you go d4 right away, then it's okay for white. You will just trade queen captures on d8, rook a captures on d8, and bishop back to d2. And your g5 pawn is nicely protected. However, after this queen to a5 move, black also has now the option of going bishop captures on g5. And after bishop captures on g5, you will go bishop captures, and now after queen captures on g5 with check, king to b1, and now this is the point that d4 is now impossible because of the simple knight captures on d4. You do not allow black this expansion in the center, because now if captures, the queen on g5 is hanging. But those are the intricacies of this, Najdorf craziness in this position. But okay, rook to g1, by Maxime, and now a5. Now you strengthen the pawn. And now there is one game in the database where king to b1 was played, but Maxime goes for h4 here, and it is as of move 15 that we have a completely new game. So Maxime continues his expansion on the king side, and Ljubo has to figure out how to continue his attack on the queen side. So queen to c7. It's a very natural developing square for the queen. You want to connect your rooks, bring your rook into the game, and start an attack somehow. And here knight to a1. As Maxime is expecting the attack to happen on the c file, he already puts his knight here as one of the defenders of the c2 square. And it is a weird square for the knight, but if you've ever seen Maxime playing the Najdorf or the Grunfeld or anything like that, you know that Maxime is no stranger when it comes to putting knights to strange places. So rook f to c8, just bringing the rook into the attack, and now b3. Probably to at some point allow ideas like bishop to c4, and also you will be able to bring this knight back maybe to b2 and d3 and then into the game this way. But for the moment this knight is pretty much needed here, preventing black further expansion with a4. So knight to f4. This is now possible, as even though it looks like you can win a pawn, it's not actually a free pawn. If captures, captures, and captures, then knight to c5 will be very strong, and it's just a very difficult position to play with white. For example, if captures, captures, black is just dominating here. a4 is coming, you're gonna bust open the position, and if everything goes well, you should win the game. So here king to b1 by Maxime, and now rook 8 to b8, probably with the idea that once the knight moves, you don't want to allow white any access to the b6 square. We have rook to c1 now, further adding more defenders to the c2 pawn, and now the freeing move d5. Maybe a bit premature, but you know, if it works, why not? Knight to c5, on the other hand, probably goes as well, because white should never capture with the knight and allow black to bust open the position with a4. But okay, we have d5 now busting open the position, and here comes bishop captures on f4. We have pawn captures, and now pawn captures on d5. So d5 comes with a pawn sacrifice for bishop to f5. Now adding another attacker to the game, bishop to d3. Maxime just blocks it. We have bishop captures on d3, and now unfortunately you cannot capture with the queen because of knight c5. Again, you will overload the knight here, and after captures, captures, again black will get a4 in, and then it's just a tough position for white to play. So instead, c captures, hoping to trade off some of the rooks, and now queen to e5. Queen to d6 a bit more precise, but Maxime makes sure that the queen goes back to the d6 square. We have rook to e1 with an attack on the queen, so you have to move it. Queen to d6, and now a nice rook lift by Maxime, rook to c6. Point is that you cannot move the queen with queen captures here, because before capturing the bishop you will first capture on c8 with check, and then you're just gonna pick up a free bishop, so that's not possible. So we have rook captures on c6, pawn captures, and again the idea is the same. If you capture the pawn, then rook captures bishop here. So Ljubo goes for the best move, knight to b6. Again, you want to dislodge this knight somehow from here, continue pushing on the queen side, but you also don't mind the trade. So knight captures, we have rook captures now, threatening to pick up the c6 pawn with rook. And here, best for white is just to play rook to c1. And after this trade here, captures, captures, and captures, white gets to pick up the f4 pawn, and the game continues. However, Maxime found a brilliant tactic here, or so he thought. Well, he tricked me, definitely. He played queen to c2, and I was following the game live, and I was like, ah, okay, queen to c2, I get it. But I didn't get it. So feel free to pause the video here and try to figure out why you cannot capture on c6 with the rook while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting that you can in fact capture on c6 with the rook, and that is in fact the best move, and the tactic that Maxime thought that works for him actually works against him. This is what I thought when I saw queen to c2. I said, okay, this is impossible because of simply rook captures on e7, and after you capture here, you have one check. Only move is queen to f8, now you trade, and now knight captures on c2, white is up a piece, game over. Problem is, I missed one move. The move I missed after this queen to e2, after this rook captures on c6, is that if you go for rook captures on e7, black has a different idea. Black doesn't have to capture the queen, and this is the essence of the game, of the position basically. So feel free to pause the video now and try to find the winning move for black here while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations, it's a beautiful Zwischenzug. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's king to f8, really a powerful move. Now you're saying your queen is still under attack and your rook is also under attack, even though you're temporarily up a piece, but it doesn't really matter. There's no way for you to keep an eye on both threats. So what you could do is move the rook and allow rook captures queen, but that's a winning endgame for black. And another thing, if you just move the queen, then just queen captures here, you rob the exchange, and white's position is just terrible due to the open white king, and black would win this game easily. So this is what MVL found out when Ljubo captured with rook captures on c6, that rook captures on e7 was impossible, and now he had to retreat. He played queen to e2 now, just put pressure on the bishop here, and rook to c7, defending. Bishop to f8 was also an option, just getting it out of the way, so it doesn't have to be a target any longer. But okay, rook to c7 definitely holds. Knight to c2. Finally, MVL starts bringing the knight into the game, and now g6. Making some room for the king, so you don't have to worry about back rank weaknesses, and in the future you might even have plans of fianchettoing the bishop to create some threats against the white king with the queen and the bishop. So queen e5, MVL here of course puts his queen on this diagonal, doesn't allow Ljubo to start an attack, and offers a queen trade, and queen c6. You don't want to allow a queen trade when your opponent's king is exposed and you have attacking chances. Also, queen captures on c2 is just a nice threat. And here, rook back to c1. The problem is, if you go back with the queen, then again you allow ideas like queen c3, and you might run into some problems here. So you definitely want to keep your queen on this diagonal here. So rook to c1, defending queen captures against queen captures on c2, and now comes bishop to d6, pushing the queen back while keeping an eye on the pawn here. And now queen to e4, offering a queen trade, which would also connect white's pawns. And here black has to decide whether to trade queens or to try and keep the tension with queen to c3. Here Ljubo captured. He decided to trade queens. Queen to c3 does seem like it offers much more for black. For example, if you can get bishop to e5 in, you might even get some checkmating ideas. Problem is, white always has queen d4, and you can always pretty much force a queen trade. Now the queen and the bishop are under attack, and once you defend the bishop, we're gonna see a nice trade here. And again, you can go knight to e1 or something, rook d1 to defend the pawn, and the game continues. But black should always be better in this endgame. However, queen captures on e4 was played. We have f captures on e4. D captures on e4 is also possible, but then white has no passed pawns, and this way white has at least a passed d pawn. But it also gives black the passed f pawn. I accidentally pushed that. And here we have rook to c3, immediately going after this pawn here. The problem with pushing the pawn to d4 is then black can push f3, and it's already defended by the rook, and then you can get your bishop in, push it all the way to f2. White could be in some problems. So instead we have knight to e1, now offering a rook trade, also guarding the d3 pawn. But here, for the final time, feel free to pause the video and try to find the only good move for black here while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding such a nice push. As it always comes to with passed pawns, they must be pushed. So f3 here for everyone else who wants to enjoy the show. And now the problem is, if you go for the rook first, f2 wins the game. there is no way to stop promotion, so you have to do something about it. Knight captures on f3 was played, and now rook captures on d3. And now that the white's only pass pawn is eliminated, now you can breathe a little easier. And also plays on both sides of the board. Black has the bishop, so black is a little better here. We have e5, chasing away the bishop, bishop to e7, and now rook to f1. Here, trying to pile up on the f7 pawn. Somehow, if white can get knight h2 to g4, maybe to h6, and then the pawn on f7 that's on a light square could become an issue, since you really do have control of the f6 square. But rook to e3, Ljubo's move pretty much solves every problem. Now, even if you try something like this, if you want to give it up for this idea, black can even just play h5 and completely nullify white's threats. Now, if you want to defend it, you have to go back knight f3. Basically, you've just wasted a move. So, after rook e3, king c2 by white, MVL now starts bringing the king into the game, king g7. We have king to d2, and now bishop to c5, defending the rook. And while the rook controls all of these squares, there's no way for the white king to enter the game any further. We have king to d1, and here you could try somehow to push with black, but for the moment, king to g8. We have king to d2 and now king g7. If black wanted more, black would probably have to go all the way down here, but then it's a question, how would you cross this with the knight knight guarding this square, pawn guarding this square. And it's very unlikely that you even can. But Ljubo says here to MVL, you're a grandmaster, you're the one who has to push if you want. So we have king to d1, and Ljubo repeats king to g8. We have king to d2 and king to g7. And it was in this position that MVL offered the draw, and Ljubo, I imagine, happily accepted the draw. So really incredible game, especially, like I said, when you take into account that 2 years ago when you check out that game, I will put a link to that game into the description below if you want to check it out. And then this game, the quality of the game just shows you that if you stick to it, if you learn just at least a little every day, and the progress will be made. And then of course you have to prepare for a game against MVL if you want to play a game of this caliber, which is just incredible. It's really a remarkable game with a lot of incredible tactical shots, especially that moment where I thought that black is just gone. But in the end, it wasn't working here after this queen to c2 idea. I thought that for sure this is losing. But then king to f8, what a move. I mean, who would have found that? But yeah, Ljubo obviously had it figured out, and MVL saw that it didn't work, and then he had to go in the retreat, and it just didn't work. So yeah, after king to g7, they drew the game, and well, it's not a small thing, getting a draw from one of the candidates of the 2020 candidates tournament. So congratulations to Ivan on this great achievement. And yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Artur Canario for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon. Continuing the coverage of the Morphy saga, checking up on Lila and Stockfish, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.